Okay, yeah, so I'm Martin Weller. I'm Professor of Educational Technology at the Open University, where I run a project called the OER Hub, where we research the impact of open educational resources. I wrote a book called The Digital Scholar, which is about the impact of new technologies on digital practice on scholars, and also a book called The Battle for Open. Yeah, so the book was written in 2011. So some aspects have changed, but actually not that much actually. So I was really interested in what does the impact of new technologies, by which I mean digital network technologies, mean for scholarly practice. And so the approach I took in that book was to take Ernst Boyer's way of thinking about scholarship. He breaks it down to four activities that he thinks scholars do. This was before the advent of digital scholarship. And then to look at each of those and think about what are the changes that scholarly digital practices bring to it. And I won't go through all of them, but they're things like research, teaching, public engagement, those kind of things. And it's interesting because and I think that the kind of overall message is that there are kind of fundamental changes happening right across the board. So no matter what you do in scholarly practice, whether you're more interested in research or teaching or whatever, then there are changes coming about because of digital network technologies. But I think people often pitch that as they're in competition with, so the old practices are going to be swept away by the new practices. And it wasn't really the argument I was trying to make. I was trying to make a much more kind of balanced argument about, as scholars, we need to think about what are the things that we really value, and then how are they best achieved with the new tools. So sometimes we mistake current practices for things that we actually value, whereas the things we value are fundamental. So an example might be the publication process. So we think the way it happens currently with journals and stuff is the way it has to happen. But actually what we really value is good quality dissemination of content, and that can happen in many different ways, and we've seen that with the rise of open access journals, but also just in terms of scholarly practice such as blogging and sharing content more widely. So I think it's much more kind of a fundamental take on how we think about what it is we do as scholars. We're an unusual institution in many ways. So we're a completely distance education university, and we have no entry requirements. So we're an open university. Anyone come and study with us. So openness is kind of obviously kind of in the heart of what we do. And so digital scholarship, and I often kind of use digital scholarship and open scholarship as kind of synonymous, really. So I think in many ways it's about us kind of reinventing what it means to be an open university in the 21st century. So we've done a number of things. So, for instance, we've got the Open Learn project where we release a lot of our content openly under an open Creative Commons license, so anyone can take that content and reuse it. We promote academics to be open scholars, sharing their own content, blogging, being part of the wider community. And also we've set up Future Learn, which is a MOOC platform, so we run open courses through that, which anyone can sign up for. So I think for the Open University, it's really a bit about trying to understand what openness means now as opposed to what it meant back in 1969, and keeping that as part of our core identity, really. Yeah, so it's an interesting question actually, because there are different ways to kind of come at this. That there are very direct policies. So we have a direct policy that 5 to 10% of all our material is released under the Open Learn project, which is openly licensed. So we've kind of got a system in place that creates OERs that we push out there. And you can argue that's just a good thing to do for us as a university because it fulfills our social mission, but also it brings students to us. It's quite an effective kind of marketing tool, so it works that way. And also, but for us, it's quite important that it helps. On the research project I run, the OER Research Hub, we looked at people who use OERs, and we found an awful lot of students who are thinking about taking full-time study often trial it first of all through OER. So that's really good for them knowing that they come into the course that they know what they want to study. But more generally, kind of just away from OER, I think there are a number of indirect policies, if you like, which might encourage digital scholarship, open scholarship. So, for example, how you recognise promotion and reward is one of those that often comes up. So if you're only going to promote people for publishing in the accepted journals, what we recognise as formal research articles, then in many ways you're kind of excluding a lot of very exciting, innovative practice that you might want to reward. So if someone has 200 citations for a research article, we regard that as a good thing. But if someone has 5,000 citations for a blog post, that doesn't get counted. Whereas that's exactly the type of profile and activity you might want to encourage as a university, both in terms of engaging with the community and being seen to be part of society, as that's what universities do. And also I think in terms of pedagogy and teaching, I think part of our role as higher education institutions is to equip our students to go out into the world in many ways. And we often talk about graduate attributes, which are things like critical thinking, those kind of things. But I think also knowing how to operate in an open, networked world is a really important attribute now. So making our learners develop online identities, understand how to negotiate online information, be part of a network, contribute to that network and have that network work for you are really important aspects that our students need to leave a university with. And they only do that really by engaging in the open network world. And so our pedagogy needs to reflect that, I think, as well. I would flip it the other way around. I think you're far more in danger of losing identity by being hidden away. So, for instance, open access articles have a higher citation rate than articles published behind a firewall. Increasingly, reputation and academic identity is about the online identity build-up. And so a forward-thinking university would want to have academics that engage in that space. I seem to be engaging in the discussions that take place in that space. And so I think there's a real damaged or potential threat to reputation if you're excluded from those spaces, because the things that are happening quickly there and what's being discussed there is often far ahead of where the formal journal articles are, which might be sort of 2 years out of date. So, but that's not to say that formal journal articles are redundant now. I think they still have a very good place. Often what you want is to have a good journal article that helps inform that online discussion that the debate, that's where the debate takes place. So being able to get the best out of both worlds, but certainly for any institution, they need to kind of be active in that space to have a good identity, I feel. So there's quite a lot wrapped up in that, because first of all, I think people are often mistaking MOOCs for online courses, and the two are not synonymous. So MOOCs are these big open courses that don't have any support built into them. So as someone who works for a distance education university, even though we do have some face-to-face support, it's not essential. And our courses, since we started, have been ranked in the top 10 quality-wise in the UK. So so that's absolutely not the case that you have to have face-to-face tuition to have good quality teaching. But equally, going online isn't cheap. So you can't. So thinking that being online, doing online courses can give you cheap alternative to that. So you can have absolutely really good quality online courses that do lots of good stuff and have all the kind of student interaction you might want, but you need support in that. And that's the Open University had the what's called the SOUL model, supported online learning model, supported open learning model. So we have, each student has a tutor, as well as there's kind of a big support network around them where they can contact people. We encourage peer-to-peer support a lot, and we put an awful lot of effort into writing the materials so they can be studied at a distance. So just turning your kind of lecture and putting it online, I absolutely agree, is a poor substitute. But if you devise stuff specifically for the online medium and for distance medium with a support network, then there's no reason why it can't be as good quality as a face-to-face education. I think what they should do is think about where openness and discipleship can be useful to them. So I wouldn't presume to know what their situation is, but there'll be some part of their work that openness could have a good positive benefit for. And start thinking about how they can do something with it. I mean, I often write about the benefits that blogging, for instance, have brought me as an academic. I'm not necessarily suggesting everyone needs to become a blogger, but for instance, the points I argue there are that it gives me a space to do experimentation, to think things through that later on I might work up into an article or a book. And also it's a way I can have a complete global network of peers that would have been really difficult to realise previously. I'd have had to kind of be continually on that kind of keynote circuit going around the world. But now I interact with this kind of global network of peers and experts while I'm having breakfast, as it were. So it brings a kind of a lot of efficiency to the way I work, and a lot of richness, and also a lot of that kind of autonomy. And the reason you became an academic in the first place was really to kind of have these rich discussions and to try things out and be able to do what you thought was interesting. So I think a lot of this kind of digital open space allows you to do things that maybe you're restricted by in your traditional practice. So I think look at those kind of areas where it can help you do what you want to realise.